Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Laurent Freyd. I'm the chairman of the Arbiters Commission at FIDE, and I'm happy to welcome with us Nebojsa Baralic.
Hello, everyone.
He is the secretary of the commission, and we will today speak about a very important topic. And so Nebojsa, as you could see in the chat on YouTube, already said hello, and he will be in charge of taking questions, interacting with you on the chat, while I will be presenting our topic today about the selection of arbiters in FIDE tournaments. So, Nebojsa, are you ready for our guests?
Yes, I'm ready, and I would also like to welcome you to the third webinar. And I hope that the webinar will be useful to all of us, and that we will make progress in the future in the field of arbiter selection. As Laurent already said, I will collect your questions from the chat room, and we will try to answer to all of them. Of course, there will be similar questions, so we will match them into one. And I hope that the IT and that streaming works well today. And finally, thanks again for participating and for understanding. Laurent?
Thank you, Nebojsa. So it's time to start this webinar. So today we will approach a few topics during the next 1.5 hours or something. And of course, 3 keywords: selection. So the first one is about how we manage, how the processes and criteria are organized, and how we worked on the Moscow Olympiad selection at the beginning of the year. The main keyword, of course, for our commission is arbiters, and I guess that plenty of you in the stream are arbiters themselves, but the subject is also interesting for plenty of chess people, so we will also speak about kind of basic things or reminders about arbiters, like titles and classifications, and what kinds of positions exist in tournament. And of course, the keyword is a FIDE tournament, so this means basically world championships. So those tournaments under the umbrella of GSC, Global Strategy Commission at FIDE, or EVE, Events Commission. So we'll speak about regulations and different topics. So basically, we will have a start. As we say in French, charité bien ordonnée commence par soi-même, which means charity starts at home. We start with arbiters. So maybe you know that we have in the FIDE model 6 levels of arbiters. It all starts with national arbiters, which we abbreviate in general NA. Those arbiters, they are licensed at FIDE and they are allowed to run federated events. However, they are not yet allowed, based on their experience and title, etc., to deliver norms to players, IM, GM, WIM, WGM norms. So the entry level is national arbiter, and we have approximately 10,000 of them. So the next level, the first FIDE title, is called FIDE Arbiter. And after following a training seminar and achieving some results in tournament, the arbiters, they can get that title, and it allows them to deliver norms for players, as I mentioned. So this is a big difference, and in terms of capabilities and also of achievement. So next level is international arbiter. This is the top level of arbiter's title, and basically you can achieve it not earlier than having 7 official tournaments, 4 to become FIDE arbiter, and 3 to become FIDE arbiter, and then 4 to become IA. And then we are reaching even higher levels with categories. So arbiters are classified in various categories. I put those numbers like, okay, we have 2,065 FIDE arbiters, a bit more than 1,000 IA category D. By definition, when you get a new title, you reach category D. Then, in order to grow higher, you can become category C by being chief arbiter in festivals or even chief or deputy in other continental events. What do we call other continental events? Are, let's say in another way, minor tournaments of continental level. Because above them we have major continental, like the continental individual championships and things like that. So when you are chief or deputy in major continental or in minor world events, you can reach category B. And those are 154 in the world at the moment. And finally, the logical top of the pyramid is category A, which you can reach by being appointed as chief or deputy in major world events. There are also alternative ways by accumulating a larger number of tournaments from a lower level, but I decided to put the normal way of reaching the categories just to put you some references. So Nebojsa, all is good in the chat so far?
Yes, chat is absolutely clear. Okay. Only hello, good evening, and you should best. And
yes,
you can continue.
Hello to everyone, of course, and welcome with us. And of course, I guess that at this point we don't have many questions because we are reminding some kind of basics. So the next slide is about what kind of tournaments are we speaking about. So FIDE tournaments, they are under the umbrella of two different commissions in the FIDE structure. One is GSC, Global Strategy Commission, and we can summarize by saying they are in charge of most of the major events. So all events by GSC are in this category I mentioned, major events. And 3 of them from the Events Commission on my left, they are also in that category. They are basically the youth individual championships. All the other ones, they are labeled, at least as far as arbiters are concerned, in our regulations, they are named other world events. And you can also see different colors here. Those in orange or purple, they are showing you those tournaments which don't happen every year. All the others, they are organized every year. Those in orange, they are all organized in the same year, and vice versa, the purple ones as well. So we have different groups like the World Championship cycle involving World Cup, FIDE Grand Prix, Grand Swiss, candidates, and finally the World Championship match. We have the same model for women. We also have team events like the Olympiad, which we will speak about quite long in the following part of this webinar. Also some rapid and blitz events. The big part on the bottom right corner shows 4 events which are in general organized as a single festival where you find rapid and blitz for open category and for women as well. And then we have from the events commission side competitions by age group. It can be for youth but also for senior, and we will find amateur, school, and also I didn't mention directly the disabled commission, but there are a strong connection with disabled commission, of course, for competition dedicated to disabled players. So this is the world level, which means that at that level we expect arbiters to be very experienced and with high skills in order to deliver good quality for the participants of those various events. So about arbiters' positions. Here we tried to summarize a typical year. First of all, we have the structure, which is of course depending on the complexity of the tournament. If you have the Olympiad, you will find all of these roles. If you have a smaller tournament like a Grand Prix or something, you will have probably just a chief arbiter and the deputy who will be in charge of a specific role like fair play or something. So the maximum structure we have would be a chief arbiter with deputy arbiter, deputy chief, sometimes dedicated people to fair play, also dedicated people to pairings when the tournament needs it, sector arbiters, this is mainly for the Olympiad or for youth tournament, where you have different age categories, age groups. And of course, arbiters, which is the main part when you have a big event. So according to our regulations...
Laurent, sorry, I apologize for interrupting you, but we need one question from Mr. Sedgwick to need clarified your first slide. He asked about numbers for all arbiters. Is it active or inactive arbiters?
Very good question. Indeed, I forgot to mention that in order to make it more relevant, I focused only on active ones. By active, for the moment, we will say it's only those who don't have an inactive flag. We are working a lot with the Commission and with the FIDE IT in order to improve our management and monitoring of our population. But for the moment, it's still difficult for us, except if we go profile by profile to check if this or that arbiter is active or not, to have the global vision. But we are working on having a more automated way of checking the actual activity of arbiters, and we expect to be a bit more accurate in the future. So I'm sorry to say it this way, but it might be that even some dead arbiters are counted here because we didn't get the information. We receive, unfortunately, sad news from time to time, and then the arbiters are removed, but if we don't get the information, they might remain in our lists and counted like this. So if we go back to the positions, in this slide we would like to make a parallel between the eligible population and the number of slots, just to understand which percentage and how representative it is to be in a world championship. So a chief arbiter, there are approximately 20 slots per year. According to regulations, they should be category A or B. So if you do the math from the first slide, it represents approximately 250 arbiters. And it means that only 7.9% would be actively involved in a world championship every year. So this means only a small part of the population can be involved every year. About fair play and pairings, we estimate between 25 and 45 per year for the fair play arbiters, for pairing arbiters between 10 and 15. It depends on Olympiad year or non-Olympiad year, of course, because this is the biggest event we have at FIDE. This is not defined at the moment in our regulations. So we are working on putting it under control, but so far I just put a question mark because we have the choice. Either we consider they are for those who are sector arbiter in fair play like a deputy or even like an arbiter. It's not documented at the moment. So the same reasoning about deputy chief. We have in general 2 deputy per 1 chief arbiter on average. So it means that we have 6.5% because the population basically is also bigger. And the color code we used is that for major events, deputy chief is expected to be category A or B as well. But in minor world events, he may be or she may be category C as well. So sector arbiters, same comment as for fair play and pairings. Something to be done to improve for the future in terms of regulations. And finally, arbiters, we have between 150 and 330 per year. And this represents between 4 and 9% of our big population of 3,500 arbiters active, either IA or FA. Just focus on 2019. So 2019 we had, thanks to all those tournaments which we described and the structure we just explained, 308 positions, which means 308 different roles occupied by 266 arbiters. So this is approximately, again, something like 7% of our global population, which means not that many, and which is natural. I mean, we don't expect to have 2,000 or 3,000 arbiters active every year in world events, but it's just to remind that, okay, it's not that easy to to be selected in a world championship. About federation, it represents 52 federations, and we had these statistics in terms of presence. So one arbiter was present 5 times, 4 arbiters 3 times, and 30 had 2 tournaments during the year. And of course, the vast majority, they had only 1 tournament in 2019. So how does it work about the appointment of arbiters? We will see today 2 different views. So the first one I'm going to describe now is what is called the current process. I didn't mention since the start of this webinar that all the selection process is not that well documented at the moment. We have tried, especially since the beginning of the year with the Olympiad, and also last year by doing some profiling, we have tried to do some work to prepare the future and make it better documented. But so far, we have an approach which is basically tournament-centric. So what does it mean? We have one of those tournaments which you saw on the mind map earlier, and there is an organizer, of course. There is also a refereeing commission, either GSC or events, and basically, mostly we have discussion in between the organizer, the FIDE commission in charge, and some of the arbiters, they are nominated by FIDE and they receive a letter by the FIDE president. Some others, they are directly appointed by the organizer, not necessarily consulting the Arbiters Commission, not always necessarily consulting the others. This is not a judgment. I mean, this is the way it goes. It's a pragmatic way. I mean, the organizer needs arbiters. Sometimes arbiters go to the organizer and tell them, I would like to be in your team, and the organizer say yes. Okay, fair enough. Simply it's tournament by tournament. They are doing their best in order to provide a good event for the chess players. So that's one way of doing. The question is then, how does it link in between tournaments? So this is where we have a big challenge when you have a tournament-centric approach, that you don't necessarily know that this arbiter was already there in another tournament, etc., etc. And you don't necessarily either take into account what would be the plans on a more global view for the development of arbiters. And of course, development of arbiters is mainly something which is important for our commission and for FIDE. The organizer himself has other priorities. His priority is to make a good event for the participants. So let's move to another important topic, which is the selection process. So I will summarize a few steps that we imagined in order to have a meaningful selection process. And this is something which we tried to follow for the Olympiad in Moscow 2020, which of course were postponed to 2021 due to the pandemic. So first of all, this is something totally new that we brought this year. It's a call of interest. The idea is to identify who is interested and who is available for a specific tournament. So once we collected all those applications, it's important also to rely on the information we would get from federations. So we consulted federations to have their feedback and potential endorsement of their arbiters. Then we had to do a shortlist. I speak to the past because, apologies, I'm mixing sometimes a bit between real life and the concept. But the idea of the shortlist is to be able to filter applications. I mean, if we have a very large number of applications, it's very important that we reduce it to a more manageable size of list for those who will make the final selection. So the main purpose of the shortlist is to reduce the number of initial applications to something more manageable by simply reducing the number of candidates per federation, because we also think that it's important not to have a whole bunch of arbiters from one single federation, while plenty of other federations are not represented at all. Then an important step is to put, let's say, theoretical criteria in front of real life, which means that we will speak about them just in the next slide, those criteria. But if we have defined criteria and among our population, whole part of the applications don't fit with the criteria, maybe we remove one of the criteria, or we adapt corresponding to what we received. So this is the last step before providing a final list. So once you have the short list plus the precise criteria to apply, you just finally select from that list the final team to be submitted to the FIDE president. Nebojsa, any questions?
Yes, we didn't receive any question about this topic, but we have one question from Mr. Alberto Muniz about active and inactive arbiters. She asked about should this special year create an exception for inactivity time?
Yes, this is a very good question. I think we haven't published the formal wording of the thing on our website, but yeah, definitely the answer is yes. Due to the COVID, we will adapt the way of handling delays for inactivity, for titles and things like that, because we don't want to penalize the arbiters because of this health issue worldwide, of course. Yeah.
Yes, that principle will be used for active and inactive and for the title applications too.
Exactly.
About 4 years and seminar. And we received one more question now from Mr. Dennis Riquad. For an arbiter, what is the procedure for being candidate for an event?
Bonjour.
Who has to be contacted?
Bonjour, Denis. So Denis is a French colleague. Basically, as I explained, so far it is not written, nothing is written, but our expectation is to improve it for the future. So as I explained in the slide before, some people contact the organizer, some send a request to the Arbiters Commission, but basically one of the key steps which we introduced this year, and this our objective is to make it like one of the entry point, is the call of interest. So we tried it with the Olympiad. It worked very well. And this is something we will include in normal processes. It's very time consuming for us, to be honest, because we will explain how many applications we got for the 2020 Olympiad. But this brings also a very, very important value for the Commission and for FIDE in general to understand who is motivated, who is who. We collected resumes and things like that, so we understand better who are our arbiters, and this is very important for the Commission this time, not only for one tournament or one bunch of tournament, but for us, which I will explain a bit later. And the next slide is, I would say, the key slide for today, because one of the trigger of this webinar was a request by the FIDE Council to share about selection criteria in order to select arbiters. So in a way, that was a challenge for us because the Arbiters Commission is not always involved. We are trying to work in team with other commissions and, as I said, to increase our understanding of the population, etc. So we will give our view about the topic, and according to us, this is related to common sense and to best practices we wish to see for the future. But for the moment, all this is not yet documented in regulations. So I introduced two concepts. One is respect and the other one is promotion. In fact, it's very important when we select arbiters, when we have published regulations, it's very important that we respect what is written in the FIDE handbook. This is for the credibility of the whole system. So when we have those requirements, which we will explain in future slide, it's important to follow them. Then we are sticking to what is decided by the federation, by FIDE. So respecting regulations. Also, naturally, we have this number of arbiters in that federation, that number in that other federation, etc. It's also, to our mind, important to respect representativeness. So that will be one of the most difficult words to pronounce in the whole webinar, but I will try my best to pronounce it properly. Which means that we want to be consistent among the global population, between the global population and the population of arbiters who would be appointed in one tournament. If you have one population representing 30% of the arbiters globally, maybe it doesn't make sense to assign 60% of them or just 1%. So this is about representativeness. Also, this is one of the keywords which is among many people included the FIDE Council. It's about rotation principle. So it's also important to have an eye on what happened in the past, who was already appointed, etc. That we can alternate the participants in the world events. But as I said, alternating is one thing, but we saw the very small percentage. So as it's important to be transparent as well, we are thinking a lot at the moment with the Arbiters Commission about looking at other federations, other sports federations, how they deal with nominations and things like that. That we have something meaningful in terms of the size of the pool where we can pick arbiters and the size of actual nominations. 7% or 4% of the population probably is too wide, and we need to find a way to be more accurate and be more meaningful in that respect. But this is also one of the things we need to design because it does not exist yet in the FIDE model. Then let's speak about 3 criteria which are rather about promoting things. So I would like that we use also criteria to promote quality. And this means using skills or spoken languages which are of added value for the various tournaments. So this is one of the criteria which is important. We have in our regulations the need to speak English when you want to get the international arbiter title. So spoken language is an important item. Also, it's important as the Arbiters Commission, as organizers of world events, to be aligned with the global vision of FIDE through their initiatives. This can be a way of being better included in the whole system somehow. And finally, this time again, we are arbiters, so we speak about arbiters, but excellence and development. I think for the Arbiters Commission, it's very important that we help arbiters grow all around the world. And sometimes, of course, if we speak about a FIDE Grand Prix where you have 2 arbiters, it's a bit difficult to include a less experienced arbiter. But if you speak about the Olympiad, then we can imagine to have some programs from the Arbiters Commission in order to help the arbiters to grow and to gain experience thanks to the help of the more senior arbiters. So this is also something which was taken into account for Moscow and which we want to promote globally as a kind of new mindset. Like we want a global view on topics that we can help FIDE to grow thanks to that. So
Oren, I collected 3 questions. Maybe it's time for that. I sent you to
yes.
chat Zoom. our chat room. You can see from Mr. Lagerman, Mr. Aval, and Mr. Kameshwaran.
Okay, so Robert asked us, do one have better chances to be elected an arbiter if you higher ranked in the ABCD system for IA arbiters? Yeah, in theory, yes, of course, because we expect to respect those published regulations. Basically, this relies to the top left item here, published regulations. They give criteria that A and B can be chief or deputy, etc., etc. So one has better chances to be elected if we respect directly the regulations, but it still means 7% of the population so far, for instance. So it's still once every 12 or 13 years if you consider that everybody would like to be in such a position. So the chances are better, but still quite low with the current shape of the pyramid. So question from Dilip Raval, what's the percentage of arbiters applied and were selected for a FIDE event? This one, I think we will... I already answered a bit earlier when I shared about the structure of arbiters, and we will have some examples about the Olympiad. Another question from Venkatashalam Kameswaran. In the selection process, the number 2 federation would be taken up so seriously. Considering the local political conditions, arbiters are not selected. Some arbiters are coming to be... Wow, sorry, sorry Nebojsa, I don't get the question, but... Siddhant Satao, following a request by the FIDE Council to explain the criteria for the selection. Yes, so this is not a question number 8, is it?
Yes, this is not.
So sorry, I'm going back to the the presentation then, yeah?
So far we have 87 participants now. That's very nice to see.
Okay. So in the previous slide, we defined, let's say, criteria in a conceptual view. Now I would like to share examples and speak about the actual context. So about published regulations, this was the first item which we shared earlier. So we have some references. Some of them, they are in arbiters regulations. So B06, for those of you who are arbiters, I guess you are familiar with what is B06. This is our regulations for the title, training, classification of arbiters. So basically in Appendix 2, which is dedicated to the classification of arbiters, we have at the bottom in Article 5.2 one article which shows in which tournament you can be present depending on your category. So this is related to Robert questions somehow. So we have reference between tournaments and classification. Also, another appendix in the B06 gives us a quota of arbiters, number of arbiters normally in this or that level of events. Then we have tournament-specific regulations. Of course, I won't read all of those articles. I just put them like an illustration. But each of those tournaments from GSC, they have a section dedicated to arbiters. So most of the time it says FIDE nominates arbiters, like for the World Cup, the Grand Prix. For the Grand Suisse, it's the same, except that they added that some of them, they are appointed by the organizer. For the candidates, it's nominated by GSC. So basically, it's pretty standard for GSC events that arbiters are nominated by FIDE through the president or the GSC, etc. But there are no written criteria on how to select. So it says, as I said at the introduction, in B06 we say what we select, category A, B, C, D, but we have no written criteria on how. And this is our topic today, to understand some views where we can decide how to select arbiters. So second element was about representativeness. So let's speak about arbiters. So you will see several times during this webinar tables where we have gender, category, continents, because those are the main criteria we basically have in order to put, let's say, arbiters in some specific groups. So this is the natural split of arbiters worldwide. So in total, as I said, we had something. So this is the figures from this month, contrary to the rest of the figures, which will be related to the Moscow situation. So which is beginning of the year, but it's not significantly different, of course. So we have a natural representation of women of 14.5%, so 538 compared to 3,178 men. And the natural representation of continents is as follows. We have 10% from Africa, 11% from America, 34% from Asia, and 45% from Europe. So when we organize an Olympiad, again, depending on the tournament, you would have difficulties to say I absolutely want an arbiter, a woman arbiter category A, when you only have 4 of them out of 2 continents. So this will be about another topic about helping development later. But yeah, when you have a very small team, representativeness might be a bit lower importance. But when we speak about the Olympiad, when it's really the big event for the whole chess family, in that context, representativeness is very, very important. So, yeah, I think I got everything about representativeness. Any questions, Nebojsa?
We have one question from Ana Srebrenic from Slovenia. Is there any expected change in the classification of arbiters? Yes, we are working on changing the rules.
Yes. So the answer is I don't know. I don't know if the category itself will change, because it's all a question about positioning. At the moment, categories, they are used directly to be selected in a world event, but the way actually they were used are somehow more like you achieved some level. And when you select a team for a world event, the concept of activity and things like that are also very important. So it's not clear whether we will touch the categories or we will introduce some other concept of evaluation or rating or whatever in order to select in a more accurate way the teams. But what is sure is that when you have such a big size of the pyramid and you only have one chance out of 13 or 15 to be selected, it seems a bit of a big gap in between the whole population and the finally selected population. Shall I continue?
Yes, you can continue.
Okay,
Thank you.
So about rotation principles. So again, when we speak about having a global view of things, rotation principles directly contribute in having a global view on the situation. So it's all about keeping a balance. And when we speak about balance, again, opposing individual view and global view, it means that we will look at things based either on single person or even on a federation being represented. And this will be regarded in terms of tournament. So for instance, if you have one arbiter doing every year the same tournament year after year, that could be one of the concepts which are somehow against rotation principles. Or if you have one arbiter in every tournament in a single year, it's also the same. So it's like a matricial approach. Rotation can be in terms of tournament or in terms of time, basically, during the year. Then we are reaching those skills and spoken languages. as I said earlier, one of the key elements is English is a must. Of course, in order to communicate with participants to some extent, but it's also very important for efficient communication inside the arbiters team itself. So this one is very important, and it was taken into account in the Moscow approach for this year. And we can imagine for the future also to have other potential areas of interest, like other spoken languages. Other spoken languages, they are very important and interesting when you speak about youth tournaments, of course, because not all of the kids are speaking English themselves. So then it's important to be quite representative of the spoken languages by the participants inside the arbiters team as well. But we can imagine as well to have a closer look at who has experience in fair play, in pairings, in rapid and blitz, in electronic boards, or any kind of criteria which can bring added value to the team. As I said, the main topic about that is to improve quality overall. So then about FIDE initiatives, the first example which comes to mind is the decision by the FIDE Council to encourage having at least 25% women in senior roles, like chief, deputy, sector, etc. in the Olympiad, for instance. And of course, this is something we are fully aligned with. Simply, as many women with whom I have discussed the topic with, we shouldn't forget that before being women, they are good arbiters and they have the minimum title and the minimum classification required for the job. So women is one thing, but first of all, we consider their strengths as an arbiter. And again, the last one, which is important for our commission, it's about supporting the development of arbiters. So in the previous slide, we spoke about women and women commission. In this slide, I would rather link ourselves to the PDC, so Planning and Development Commission, where we want to help arbiters to develop. And of course, another element when we speak about quality, experience, and so on, a world championship is not meant to be a first international experience. So we have plenty of good national arbiters. I'm not saying that they are not good, but in the principle, when you reach the world event, it's supposed to be the result of already a long experience and validated by international standards. So that's the main concept about it. But we also want populations which don't have that many opportunities to gain experience to be included. So it means, for instance, to include some programs like mentoring from a very experienced arbiter with a FIDE arbiter or a young international arbiter to share experience and help the mentee to grow thanks to the advice of his older colleague and so on. And of course, when we are speaking about Olympiad, it makes sense to reserve a small part of the team. We haven't defined a precise percentage, but this can be 5, 10, probably maximum 15% of the team to people in that scope where we, on purpose, take a bit less experienced colleagues in the team, but we pair them with experienced arbiters so that they help progressing. Nebojsa?
No questions.
Okay.
Okay, we just received one question from Mr. Alan Atkinson. You can see on the YouTube, or I will read. When arbiters are appointed, the skill with boards or pairing or fair play, they do not get appointed as chief, so do not move up to arbiter categories. Can this be addressed for the future?
Yeah, that's a very good question. It's all about management in general. yeah, it's as if you have like one of the career paths, if we can call it this way. One career path would be like management, and another one would be like specialist. But this is something we haven't dealt with so far, to be honest, Alan. But it's a very good question. But the whole evolution path and categories, as we said, or rating or whatever, is being designed. And as I said, one thing which is important for us is to look outside of FIDE as well and see what other sports are doing and doing well, and take some examples from the outside. So this is one of the next important things for the Arbiters Commission. We've been focusing this year, I just take a couple of minutes to explain where we are in the work of the Commission. So this year we progressed a lot in the education side. And this is a key element, that we have a strong education for the quality of arbiters. And one of the next big chunk is about evaluation, about appointment, about selection of arbiters. So the next slide is an important one about our view for the future. So we spoke about the tournament-centric approach, and now I would like to share with you a document for those of you who are familiar with the reports we shared with the General Assembly or the Council, which are published. You already saw that diagram because it was part of our report, and this is the result of our work last year with the Commission in Minsk, which we also shared with the Council in Budapest. So basically our view is that we need to, of course, work in team with different commissions. We already spoke about it, and we can imagine to have some growth programs like mentoring programs or whatever I mentioned already, to have them as a part of the inputs we get. We can also benefit from inputs from organizers, the PB, as we mentioned, the 25% women or things like that, the continent, and all those elements. It's important for us that at some point we are able to have what we call the FIDE Arbiter HR management system, where we can collect, on the one hand, elements of criteria which will help us selecting arbiters or making proposals for arbiters in teams for world events, but also listen to the arbiters. Who is interested to be in this or that tournament? So all that together, cumulated with discussions with organizers, federations, events, GSC, Commission, etc., it's expected to give us the capability to make, okay, this is very ambitious, to be honest, to make a full year appointment plan is very ambitious, but I think it's important to place the bar quite high if we want to have a complete meaningful system. So that we make a yearly appointment plan that can be reviewed by GSC events and the FIDE president before granting appointments, but also, as we said earlier, some of the arbiters are nominated by organizers, and this makes sense. However, what would be important for us is that the organizers, they pick not only from their local arbiters or people who consulted them without going through FIDE, they pick them from a pool of validated arbiters for world events. And in this way, this would help being compliant with published regulations, for instance. So this is our targeted situation. If we compare both appointment strategies, so the current one, tournament-centric selections are made events by events, versus the globally managed appointment strategy, where we have a global plan. Let's see what the differences would be among 4 criteria which we chose. The first one, of course, is compliance. So that's key in order to be credible in what we are doing. Second one is about transparency of selection. So transparency of selection is basically moving one step further to what we are doing today in explaining the criteria, etc., etc. Central management of arbiters, of course, this is, again, not only to focus on one tournament, but to focus this time on having our population of arbiters developing and growing. And finally, the flexibility for organizers, which is one of the main added value for now. So with the current way of doing, unfortunately, we are not that much aligned with those categories A, B, C, D assignments according to the regulation. It can mean also that we need to review the regulations, of course. But we have a big gap at the moment. About transparency of selection, nothing is documented, as we said. Central management, some of the organizers, and I would like to thank them, they go to us and they are really interested in being part of the team, in saying, in coming to us and asking, how can I select my arbiters that it makes sense for FIDE? And that's really a great opportunity to collaborate with the Arbiters Commission and the organizers, and that's really appreciated by the Commission. So thanks to them. And finally, okay, the flexibility for organizer in a tournament-centric, I didn't put it at 100% because there are always constraints, but yeah, this is the most flexible possibility because they can select somehow the way they want. When we go to the globally managed process, of course, as it's centrally managed in a way, we have compliance with regulations expected at 100% because it's controlled by FIDE. Then transparency of selection. I didn't put it 100% simply in order to translate that refined criteria. If you remember in one of the slides that I shared earlier, we had one step before finalizing the team selection, one of those refining criteria steps, and this means a bit of decision. And anyway, I would say that making a decision when you make a selection is quite obvious. In the ECU, they chose to have an application form where the arbiters are giving a lot of criteria, and at the end, my understanding is that it gives you a mark. Like you score 95, 100, I don't remember exactly about the scale. And I think it's a very, very good idea in the principle to have some objective criteria in order to evaluate arbiters. But at some point, what do we reach if you have this need of selecting a team and making the whole team together? It means you select one who scored 90 points while you reject one who was 91 points. So that's why for now, maybe you will find it a bit over cautious to wait for publishing systems and tools, but I prefer to go pragmatic as we did with the Olympiad, and then when we are sure where we want to go and what shape the pyramid would have and things like that, then I would be happy to implement similar tools as our friends from ECU already did, probably adapted to the context, but in order to keep this flexibility on the selection somehow. Of course, being globally managed, it means that the Arbiters Commission would be somehow involved, and we can understand how the arbiters are evolving. And I reduced a little bit the size of the flexibility for organizers, just to echo, if you remember the slide where we had this pool of arbiters where the organizers would select from instead of the whole population of arbiters worldwide. So, but I think the price to pay is not that high in order to have a more consistent and much stronger system for FIDE. Nebojsa, any questions?
No questions, only one suggestion, proposal from Mr. Arno from Amsterdam about add to one qualification criteria about mentoring experience, and Tanya Karali answered that how mentors are selected in that case.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, of course, that could be one of the criteria to support the development of arbiters globally. Not sure it would be directly a criteria to be selected contrary to another, but yeah, when we have a tournament where mentoring is one of the features, let's say it this way, it probably makes sense in a way to include that mentoring capability. So I guess that everybody is interested in order to understand how we worked for Moscow 2020. I still call it Moscow 2020, although we all know that the tournament was postponed to next year. Hopefully we can have it in 2021. So Robert is asking, have you already selected arbiters for Moscow 2021? So my answer will be, we made the job for Moscow 2020. Now the open question is, what are we doing with this team? And I don't have the answer yet. As I said, opening the call of interest was very much time consuming. So one of the options can be simply, we made the job of selecting arbiters, so we can just check who is still available for the next round and we save time, or we open fully again. We haven't decided yet, but this is very time consuming. So we will see first of all when we have more information about the Olympiad itself, of course. So case study, yeah, Moscow 2020. So how did it work? So it all started with a discussion in Jerusalem with Emil Sutovsky, so the chairman of the Global Strategy Commission, in December. And I must admit, I'm very happy with that discussion together with Emil, because at that time we said, yeah, we definitely need to change the way to work on the selection of arbiters for the Olympiad. Let's start with a call of interest. And yeah, a few days later we opened the call of interest, and this was really successful. Very much time consuming for Nebojsa, the FIDE office, because we received 526 applications from 136 federations. And I would like to mention that this is out of Russia, or maybe a few Russian ones contacted us. I don't remember if they are in the final number or not, but this is not significant because Russia is the organizing country, and they have a dedicated selection process of local arbiters, as we call them. So the call of interest was open from the 17th of December, till the 7th of February. Initially, we opened it till the 10th of January, but as I said, we are building things while we are progressing on various topics at a time. So at the 10th of January, we didn't have a final design of the process, so we agreed together with Emil again to extend. And this was better because it allowed more arbiters the option to get in. So after we had this fixed list of arbiters, a big chunk of work again was to send the names to each federation and ask for their feedback. And on this step, from 136 federations, we had 101 federations playing the game with us and giving their feedback. So that was also a great job. This was done until the Abu Dhabi Congress in February. And this was, of course, the opportunity for me as well to discuss with people directly, to explain our vision on this selection process. And it was very, very important and interesting. After that, inside the commission with the councillors of the commission, we made a short list. I will explain later how it worked in detail, but basically we reduced from 526 to 254 arbiters from 127 federations. And finally, by the 1st of April, so we reached, in collaboration with GSC, a final list of 141 arbiters from 108 federations. So as I've written it at the bottom of this slide, this was an important cross-commission collaboration between arbiters and GSC, and I really, really appreciate this because it's the way we like to work in our commission, to collaborate with others and to help FIDE grow in this way. So, how will we focus on this case study? I've split it in two parts. First part is looking at the past. I called it baseline 2016-2018. So let's look back at 2016-2018. This is the map of countries involved either in Batumi or in Baku or both. And we had the current baseline. In Baku, we had 193 arbiters overall from 104 federations, including 29 arbiters from Azerbaijan. In 2018, you can see that we have a growth in terms of size for the team, moving to 206 arbiters. This is easily explained by the fact that in 2018, we introduced the concept of fair play arbiters. So there was a dedicated team of fair play arbiters in Batumi. And they came from 103 federations, among them 27 Georgian colleagues. What is interesting to look at is if our colleagues were in both events or only in one of them. So we had 90 colleagues from 80 federations who were at the same time in Batumi and in Baku. So this is 45% approximately of the field, which is pretty high percentage when we think about rotation. And in total, we had 309 different arbiters from 127 federations, which means that we have approximately 44 federations, if I'm correct, not represented. When I say 44, it's considering federations who have at least, and again, I remind you the comment I made when answering to David Sedgwick earlier, it's about the data we have, but who have at least one IA or one FA in their list of arbiters. So, how does it work in terms of senior arbiters? As we said earlier, we have different roles like chief arbiter. So there is one in each Olympiad, 2 deputy chief arbiters, one for open and one for women. 10 sector arbiters, 5 open, 5 women, and since 2018, 1 fair play officer. So how did it work for our 2 Olympiads? We had, so those logo, I'm not sure you're familiar with them, they are the continental logo. And on the left, you have Baku 2016 and Batumi 2018. So in terms of senior arbiters, we had Egypt represented twice among the senior arbiters, the only African federation. For the Americas, we had Mexico present twice, the only one in 2016, but joined by British Virgin Islands in Batumi. Then about Asia, we have 2 federations represented twice, India and the UAE, also joined by Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan, Lebanon. And from Europe, we had from the organizing country, Azerbaijan, of course, 3, Belarus, Germany and Greece represented twice, also joined by Russia, Belgium, Georgia organizing country in 2018, and Iceland. So this is the current picture where we have in Baku 10 federations represented among the senior arbiters, and in Batumi 12 federations represented among the senior arbiters. So another very important topic is about the representation of women. You can see that there is a big jump from 2016 to 2018, while there was a slight drop for men. So this is good for representativity of women. So in Baku we had 15% women, and 8 of them, only single person was deputy chief in Baku among the senior arbiters. And in Batumi it increased to 23% of the overall field and 21% of the senior roles. This is close to the 25%, but in 2020 we tried to be even closer and reach the 25%. And not only in senior roles, but also in overall population. About titles and categories. So in 2016-2018, we had IAs were theoretically the main target. They represented 72% of appointments, which is not too bad at all. FAs, I would say they represent development because they only have a few tournaments of experience behind them. And of course, NAs, you can see this is quite consistent with my comment. They are used at the Olympiad only in exceptional circumstances. Because basically we have such a field of 3,000 and more internationally titled arbiters that it makes sense to pick from them, except when using some local arbiters, of course, when the local organizer does not have such a big field. When we speak about Russia, we have more than 200 FIDE titled arbiters, so the question doesn't come. But for smaller countries, like was the case in Georgia, it makes sense to some extent to use, of course, national arbiters instead, as part of this development and chess celebration, which is the Olympiad. So maybe Nebojsa, do we have questions?
We have only one question from Nuno Andrade for Portuguese. Is it possible to know the federation feedback?
Yeah, it's easy. You can ask your federation what they said about you, I guess. It's the easiest. About processes for 2020. So now we look at the actual work. Getting all the data which I just presented was already a significant work, because data was not documented and we had to collect them and to process them to make them usable. But honestly, I don't regret at all, because it gives us a good visibility in order to have some monitoring and understand where we start from. And then it also helps deciding where we want to go to. So first step, as you remember, is the call of interest. So we published it, as I said, in December. And what was the purpose? We had to collect elements, understand who is interested and available for the Olympiad, but also provide some information about their profile, like sending their resume, specify what languages they speak, because that's part of the check if they speak English, and also about other alternate languages, as we could speak about it earlier. The wish for their assignment, whether they wish to be match arbiter, fair play, deputy, chief, sector, etc. So this is about individuals. As I said, the response rate was very, very good. So this is a very positive element which is encouraging for the future. And of course, when we got the elements from the call of interest, on our side, we went to seek other kind of information, like actual activity on the FIDE rating server. What is their history of participation in the last two Olympiads? So basically, if we didn't have this data compiled, we would have difficulties to compare with the history. So about the demographics, who did answer the call of interest? Again, we have, as I said earlier, the similar graph where we have continents, titles, and gender. So this is how it appears. Here in this graph, I had the FIDE flag. Sometimes, just to simplify readability, there was one arbiter with FIDE flag who does not necessarily appear in all graph, because I usually focused on the actual continents. So basically, when we make the ratio, excluding of course national arbiters because they are not in the scope, we had a few, 20 of them, who were national arbiters. Some of them, they were in progress in order to become FIDE arbiter, but at the moment they applied, or even when we made the selection, I think we extended it to evaluate in case they got the title in Abu Dhabi, for instance. But if they were national arbiter after the selection, we just removed them from the list because the call of interest was open to FIDE arbiter and international arbiters. So again, we are around 70% of IAs, which is the main target, as we said earlier. And an interesting statistics is about the level of applications between men and women. You can see that women representation is above their natural presence worldwide. As we said, we have 14.5% women and 16.9% of the applications were from women. So this is very interesting in terms of interest. And those 16.9%, they represent even one woman out of three who is titled. So this is very important. One out of three of the sorry, of the IAs, I think. Oops, I've been a bit too fast. So if we have a look at the split by categories, we can see that, as we said earlier, the overall representation in the Olympiad is approximately 4% of the global population. So we have a very big interest from the category A arbiter. Almost half of the population applied, almost 40% of category B, and then it drops, and which makes sense. I mean, not every arbiter of this or that category is always interested in being part of a world championship. That makes sense. So another angle of view which we used was about how did it interest people who were already at the Olympiad. And this will just be a big advertisement of the success of the Olympiad, because we have one arbiter out of two who was either in Baku or Batumi who applied again, and even 2 out of 3 of those who were in the last 2 editions. I'm sorry for those ones, but some of them, they will just not be selected again because of those rotation principles, and being three times in a row is a pretty long streak in this context. So yeah, this is how it splits in terms of appointments in 2016-2018. We have approximately 70% of new arbiters. I say new, but as you can see, I only analyzed from 2016 because we couldn't get the data prior to that. I still wish to get it from one way or another, but for now we didn't have this information. But already 2 years is 2 editions of the Olympiad is not too bad, and it helps understanding where we come from. So let's have a look at continents now. So that's very, very interesting, and it shows how the call of interest was successful everywhere. So we have, let's have a look at Africa first. As we are speaking about continent, I always present them by alphabetical order. So from Africa, we had 21% of the 21% of the applications, they came from Africa. And this is 11 points above their natural representativeness. And also in terms of federations represented, those applications, they were 110 from Africa. They represented 87% of their countries, which is quite a high percentage. For the Americas, we are 2 points above the natural representativeness, and more than 2/3 of their federations applied for the Olympiad. In Asia, we are below, 9 points below. This is quite significant, but on the other hand, we have quite a lot of arbiters in Asia as well. So on bigger numbers, we still have quite a lot of applications from Asia, 127 from 33 federations. And finally, with Europe, we are a little bit below, 4 points below the 46% of representation of Europe among arbiters, but 90% of the federations were represented. So overall, we have almost 80% of federations which applied, 136 out of 171. So this is huge. Nebojsa, anything from the chat?
One question from Mr. Patrick Liying. Why do FIDE ask for a call of interest? Should you not go to the National Federation first? But we have small discussion.
So, if I understand well, the question is, why did we contact directly arbiters?
Yes.
Because we needed to understand who our arbiters are. And for us, it's very important to be in touch with the arbiters. But as you mentioned, the involvement of the federation, I included it in the process, and this is very important that we had this feedback. And as I said, we had more than 70%, almost 75% of the federations who had applications. They went back to us with their feedback, so they participated in a way or in another in the process. And that was very important for us to have both you. As you could see since the beginning of this presentation, in many occasions we have a kind of matricial approach, not only one dimension, but 2 dimensions. And here again, it's the same concept. When we contact the arbiters directly, we get information from them, but we don't consider that federations have no word. So we take the second dimension by having federations inputs.
And you have one kind of private message from Mr. David. You can see in the chat room, YouTube channel.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you, David. You can send me what you have if you don't mind. So, okay, let's go fast about zones, because zone is not the main focus, but I thought it was also, and this is also something we followed during the process, so it makes sense to speak about it. But it was very interesting. You see all those green parts, it means that all the countries, all the federation of a single zone applied. I mean, arbiters from those countries. And this represents 2/3 of the scope. Okay, some of the zones are a single country zone, but again, it's pretty successful, and we can see that only 3 zones had less than 50% of their federations represented in the application. So there was really a great participation of arbiters worldwide, and I'm very happy of that, especially as we started it, let's say, out of written regulations, because regulations don't exist yet. So this was a pragmatic launch of call of interest. Maybe not all federations were in a position to relay the message to their arbiters if they didn't get the info or things like that. So it's really encouraging as a first result. So as we were speaking about federation, maybe I will just repeat concepts which I already covered by answering some questions. But in the federation's inputs, we allowed the federations to send us their feedback until the end of the Congress. So basically the very end of the month of February. And then 101 of them answered. I already explained that a bit earlier by answering question. One thing which is important in the philosophy we followed during this process is that when we didn't get an answer from the federation, we didn't consider this is not an endorsement. To the contrary, we considered that there was no objection by the federation. So I know that some arbiters, they are in conflict with their federation or whatever. And in that case, FIDE was not the one who filtered when not receiving a feedback from the federation. We had the open approach on the subject. So after this, we had to work on a shortlist. So this was done in collaboration with counselors of the Arbiters Commission. And I thank them for the work and also I think that Alec McFarlane was involved as education leader. This was quite some work in order to go, because as I said, we don't have so strong tools for the moment. But I hope that Vladimir will help us delivering some important tools for us in order to better monitor our population. So in order to see the activity of arbiters, we have to look one by one at the FIDE profile. And that was quite some work by the counselors to check who is active, who is experienced, and they could mark based on the level of tournaments which were present. So the call of interest was, I see a question from Alberto Muniz, but if federation gives a negative approach, is it final? Right. It depends. I mean, in most of the cases when we got a negative feedback from the federation and the profile was identified as somehow not strong for the Olympiad, we didn't challenge the federation, because it's also a question of efficiency, of course. As I said, we have 526 applications, so one out of four only is selected at the end somehow. So when we had negative feedback and the profile was not particularly interesting for us, we didn't challenge. We just removed from the list, and this helped making some selection. We did not have negative feedback, I guess, for profiles which were interesting in terms of experience and things like that. Yes, Nebojsa?
Please, you can see last question in our Zoom chat room from Mr. Raval. I sent you about experienced arbiter and new chance for the new arbiters. And
no, this is okay. I think we need to be open on the subject, and as I mentioned when we spoke about promoting things in the selection of arbiters and also in the way of developing FIDE in general, I suggested that we have between 5% and 10% of spots in big events like the Olympiad, which could be reserved to less experienced colleagues. It does not mean beginners. So I wouldn't say we are speaking about a vicious cycle, because first of all, it's important to understand that we are speaking about world level. So this is the top level in the world. On the other hand, we have some countries which are not in a position to organize a lot of tournaments. So this indeed does not give a lot of opportunities locally to gain experience. But it doesn't mean that we need to train beginners in the Olympiad, for instance. So this is another topic which we are working at with PDC, which is trying to answer the question, how do we increase opportunities where there are few, naturally speaking? Okay, so this is very, very important from to put things into perspective. I understand that if I'm an international, no, not an international, if I'm a national arbiter, very motivated, and I don't have local opportunities, I would like to find ways to learn from a world or continental event. But yeah, this is not granted by definition. We are trying to find solutions in order to increase the possibilities to learn and to grow, but it's two different items. In some countries, it takes years and years and years even before being allowed by the local system to reach the FIDE arbiter level, because they have a very strong local curriculum, and at some point we are also thinking about harmonizing the strengths of the titles overall. But this is a totally different question, and it's still full of question marks. We haven't an answer on everything about increasing development, of course. So where was I? Yeah, we were speaking about the shortlist. So basically the call of interest was 100% open, as we said. We contacted any IA or FA. They were all allowed to answer the call of interest, which means that some of the federations, they had plenty of applications, and some of them they had none, and some 1, 2, 3, as you can see in the graph at the bottom. We had from 1 to 29 applications for a single federation during the call of interest. And one of the elements which we had to do is to reduce, as I said, to have a meaningful shortlist. And we reduced to 3 to 4 names maximum per federation. So among the filtering criteria, we had, of course, as I explained already, we removed national arbiters who don't have FIDE title. We removed arbiters who were already selected for the Paralympic in Khanty-Mansisk. That was in order to have rotation principles, and also practically speaking, one of the events was finishing as the next one was immediately starting, so it didn't seem really realistic for us to reuse the same. But yeah, it makes sense also in terms of rotation. So we removed those from the Paralympic, and of course we took into account the priority sequence from federations. So when they gave feedback, most of the time they also said, okay, our preference is take first this one, that one, that one. But again, in this way, as well as I said, when we have negative feedback from a federation, we might have challenged it. As well here, we not always respected the preferences from the federations. And I'm afraid that ladies will not be happy with the information I'm going to share, but in some cases, the first lady was much later than position 3 or 4. And in that case, we took the decision to include a lady, because this allowed us to reach those 25%, as we mentioned earlier. So in such cases, we did not always follow strictly the sequence given by federations, because federations, they have their objectives. From the moment they didn't say we don't want that you take this person because of this or that reason, which would be acceptable, then we followed our own objective to have a big enough pool of women to be able to select 25% of the final field from it. Okay? Any other question, Nebojsa?
No, you can continue.
Okay, so let's reach the final steps. So the last two steps of the process are exactly as I described earlier in the theoretical view. We refine the selection criteria and basically change them into actual numbers, and of course review the shortlist to select the Olympiad team of arbiters. So what does it mean, refining criteria? Maybe now we will better understand in terms of real numbers. So we said, first element, we keep the same size of team as Batumi. So that was the first element, static element. 206 is our global target. Then, as we said, Russia has a very big pool of internationally titled arbiters, and it makes sense that they can provide between 50 and 65 arbiters. So we made basic math. 206 minus 65 is 141. So we have our first target. We want to select 141 arbiters, and we add another criteria, maximum 2 per federation, in order to avoid too many members of a single federation. And this gives us also like an arbitrary backup of 15 to 25 names. In case, of course, 15 is in case we reach 50 instead of 65, and 25 is to have a little buffer in case people are withdrawing from their initial application. Then we had a look at the estimated representativeness. So this is the rough estimate. When I use those percentage I shared earlier, 25% women is 35 people out of 141 and so on. So this is estimated rough, because depending on how we want then to encourage this or that development program, we might pick a few from Europe who is very big, and Russia is also in Europe. So those numbers, they were slightly adapted at the end in order to follow some other objectives. In terms of rotation, then we said, okay, it would be a good way to reduce the overlap. Instead of having 45% as from Baku to Batumi, to reduce 30 to 33%, which means 1 out of 3 maximum would come from Batumi. And also maximum 20%, 1 out of 5 who was already in the last 2 Olympiad. So this is like transforming rotation principles into figures. And finally, about the strategy we wish to implement, for instance, including federations absent from 2016-2018, and also transparently use the Olympiad for arbiters development. As I spoke about those mentoring programs, etc., I will speak about it a bit later. So for the finalist of senior arbiters, we had a few guiding principles. Basically, one of the inputs we had was that there would be 2 sectors more than in Batumi, so it means 16 roles for senior arbiters instead of 14. Respecting regulations, as I announced in the initial theoretical view in this webinar, only A or B for senior roles. And respect the 25% women, which means 1 woman deputy chief and 3 as sector. And 4 out of 16 is exactly 25%. we are good in math in the Arbiters Commission and GSC. So then a big change. If you remember, we had 10 federations represented in Baku, 12 in Batumi, and in Moscow we intended to have 16 federations represented for senior arbiters, avoiding any 2 senior arbiters from a single federation. And also, of course, as we said, this 33% from last edition, 1 out of 5 maximum from the last 2 editions, this is a way to keep experience. I mean, we could have said, okay, rotation is rotation. Nobody from the last 2 editions goes to the Olympiad, but that would have been probably too risky. So that's what we tried to implement. And also, one thing which was important for us is to keep continuity in terms of age. So the blue curve here is about Moscow. We didn't want to have empty age groups. In Baku and Batumi, you had nobody younger than 35 and nobody between 41 and 45. In this team, we had arbiters from below 35 to 75-year-old. And I think the overall average for senior arbiters, it dropped from 59 in Baku, 58 in Batumi to 52 in Moscow. So about representativeness in the finalists. So now we leave the senior arbiters, but we look at the full team, of course, of foreign arbiters, not including the Russian nominated arbiters. And we have 36 out of 141 arbiters who are women. So we managed to reach even a little bit above 25% for women of any kind, not only the senior roles. And in terms of representativeness, as I explained earlier, we have a little bit lower representation of Europe and Asia compared to the natural split, and a bit more of African colleagues and American colleagues compared to the natural split. So next topic, rotation principles. So in the final list, you can see that we have 23%. So this is slightly above the target we fixed. We initially said we would like 20% or less, so it's 23%. Not too bad, but we could have improved a little bit. 23% of the selected people, they were in last 2 Olympiads, and 20% they were in one or the other Olympiad. But this means we have 57 arbiters who were not in Baku nor in Batumi. So just to remind where we were. So we had 44% overlap. This time 33% overlap. What is interesting is that even with less arbiters, we are reaching more federations. So this was one of our goals, to have a maximum of federations represented while respecting our other criteria of representativeness. I mean, we could have increased, for instance, the number of federations, but then the level of representation from Africa or Asia or America would have been even bigger, and some other criteria wouldn't have been respected. But as we have this approach of being data driven, the next time those ones who were not in Batumi, Baku, and Moscow, they will probably have better chances to be included for the next Olympiad. So we had 22 federations, candidates from federations who applied for 2020 who were not in 2016 and 2018, and we took 17 out of them. So this is a big majority of those ones. And okay, there are various explanations why we didn't take all of them, but 17 out of 22 is very good ratio, isn't it?
Laurent, sorry, I apologize for interrupting. You can see last two questions, comments about 2 arbiters per federation from Mr. Phelps and Mr. Atkinson. You can see in the YouTube chat room.
How does one accept experienced arbiters and at the same time for federations with a large number of category A or B IAs give less senior arbiters a chance if there is to be only 2 arbiters per federation? Sorry, the sentence is too long for my brain, which is a bit tired by the webinar. So basically I understand that we have federations with a lot of IAs, category A and B, but even if they have a lot, they wouldn't have more than 2 arbiters in the team. Yes, that's when we speak about quotas, it can happen. I mean, we are in this special case where, in the case of the Olympiad, A and B, it only concerns senior arbiters, right? So in that case, we have 16 arbiters, as we mentioned. So in no way we would pick from 2 from one country, as we explained. So I don't think it's really relevant in this case. I mean, that's why we consulted the federations. And when we consulted the federation, we asked, give us your ordered list, your sorted list with numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and we will pick from that list. And in general, we followed what the federation said, except, as I said, when they didn't put women high enough in the list. In that case, we put the first woman high enough that she remains in the short list. But the question is overall about related to the question by Anna earlier about the whole system. But yeah, it's not because a lot of skilled arbiters are in a country that it grants them, in the current way of doing, it grants them more slots than others, especially for the Olympiad. I mean, we have the FIDE motto Gens una sumus, and similarly to what I said about 25% women, we are not saying that we want to take arbiters from any federation at any price. When we take an arbiter in the list, he or she is before an arbiter, before being a member of this or that federation, before being a woman or a man. But once we consider their profiles corresponding to the need, then we are at the next step of the selection. So, one important thing for me, this is less about numbers, but this is about vision and let's say strategy about selecting arbiters. So, when we made the selection for the final list, we had in mind to support FIDE development in one way or another. So, for instance, one of the way to increase quality was to nominate a dedicated team, subcommittee, if you like, of the Arbiters Commission in order to prepare the Olympiad. Because our view about the Olympiad is the following. First, you select the team, as we did, through a call of interest, evaluation, etc., etc. And you consider that based on the resume, based on the tournaments you could see on the FIDE profile, also sometimes based on the fact that we know or not the arbiter. But basically, knowing the arbiter is one information, but we try to be data-driven and use information from experience, etc. Not saying we want some friends and this is our way to select. It's not a cooptation process. It's a selection process based on some criteria. So our view in order to prepare the Olympiad was this way. First, you select a team which you consider strong enough to be appointed as arbiters for the Olympiad. And as a second step, you train them like you would train a team, the national team who is going to the Olympiad themselves. You select them, you evaluate their strengths and the areas where they should improve, and in the next 5, 6, 8, 9 months, depending on how early we make the call of interest before the actual tournament, we put in place this coaching process and preparation process. And then the arbiters reach the Olympiad by being trained. So this, I put it as part of the FIDE global growth, that we have a mindset oriented to quality, to do things in a meaningful way. Then another part is serving the Arbiters Commission. So in this approach, before doing the exercise, I had a discussion with the FIDE president, and I said, for this Olympiad, of course, the idea is not necessarily to do it for every Olympiad, because we want rotation and things like that. But for this Olympiad, for me, it was important to have my team in the Olympiad, the Arbiters Commission. Not to go on holiday together, but to make them work even more than usual. The idea was, and I would like to thank the team members because they all accepted the idea. The idea was that, okay, we ask the FIDE president to be in the team for the Olympiad, but we use maybe not 100% of the free time, but part of the free time to work on projects and help our commission to provide some work for FIDE. Because as you know it, being in a FIDE commission is volunteer work. So we don't always have a lot of dedicated time, and being together at one place during 2 weeks is a wonderful opportunity to be focused on projects and deliver for FIDE in order to continue growing designing the future. Another important element, we already spoke about it several times, is about supporting 25% women initiatives. And this time I have another focus on development. It's about introducing mentoring programs and things like that. And on purpose, I put here on this slide the various logo in terms of responsibility. So Arbiters, Women Commission, Development Commission, because for me it's very important that we are stronger when we work cross-commission and we follow together some common goals for FIDE, and that we demonstrate our capability in this way. And then the idea is that is like a win-win situation where all the actors win: arbiters, federations, and also the FIDE overall. I hope that everything is okay in terms of streaming, my network is a bit down at the moment, so let's continue. Nebojsa, can you see it from your end? Is it streaming fine?
Yes, I can hear you and I can see all on the YouTube channel.
Okay, so let's hope that everything is okay on the stream. Sorry for the interruption. So let's just conclude about the waterfall and about the Moscow Olympiad selection through the waterfall. So basically we have a huge amount of applications, above 526. Important for us was to involve the federation, and we got 67 negative feedback or things like that, which removed some applications from the initial list. Then, as I said, we removed some national arbiters titled. We also removed arbiters already assigned for the Paralympic, and this led us with a list of arbiters where we wanted to reach those 3 to 4 arbiters maximum per federation, which means after the arbiter review, we had 254 arbiters, as I mentioned earlier. Then we had this exercise in cross-commission work between Arbiters Commission and GSC in order to form the final list of 131 with 22 backup, and we may consider that those who were not selected could be a potential reserve in case when picking from the 22 we still need available profiles. So basically where we are now, for this Olympiad 2020 we had a, let's say, pragmatic approach because no formal process was written in advance. And we tried to apply common sense and fairness. Of course, I know that whatever decision you make, you can't please everyone. But we tried to be data-driven, as I explained, by using the history. And, of course, follow a global vision oriented on FIDE growth and quality. Is it still streaming?
There are some problems with streaming.
Yeah, it says that, okay, that it's not receiving.
It is continuous slower.
Okay, I think I will go back to when did it stop? Okay.
Okay, I send the message. Okay.
Okay, so is it? It's coming back, right?
Yes, you are back.
When did it stop?
But
oh my God! Wow. Okay, it's far away in the past. Yeah. Okay, so let's go back probably to this. I don't know exactly where it stops, so apologies if it starts again.
Practical approach on the project.
Yeah, but
39.
Yeah, it doesn't work. So what's going on? Okay, let me try to switch on. Oh, it lags, but okay. Anna says it lags, but it does not stop. So apologies for the technical issue. So I will go back to this summary waterfall, and let's hope it's fine. Otherwise, we may record the end and send it as a different video. So that's what happens when you are live. So basically, I explained that as a summary, we had those 526 applications, then filtered by the federation reduced by 67, and then naturally, we removed national arbiters and people selected already for the Paralympic, which left us with more than 400 names to reduce the initial list to 254. And the final selection helped us reaching 141 names and 22 backups with 91 reserves. So yeah, basically from what I read in the chat, it will be a bit weird at the end of the streaming, because we were a bit lost on our hand and on what is going on.
Yeah.
So the conclusion about this selection, I would like to highlight a few topics on how we worked. We had a practical approach on the project, which means as there is no formal process already written, we tried to implement some common sense and fairness, being data-driven by digging into how it worked for Baku and Batumi, and also, of course, trying to implement our vision on FIDE growth and quality for the arbiters in general. Of course, when you make a choice, you can't make everyone happy in Nebojsa, right? So
Yes.
I know that not everybody is happy, but we try to put the best interest of FIDE at the top of all considerations. So I hope this was successful. What was very important for me as well, and for the Commission in general, was to have a participative work, which means, on the one hand, we consulted individuals to understand who is interested. Federations were consulted, but also cross-commission collaboration happened. And this is also very important for us. So finally, I would like to thank a few people or organizations, because they were involved and they took part in this process. So, of course, the 526 candidates who took the time to present their resume, to contact us and show their interest. The FIDE office, who was in the first line in order to collect all those messages. Of course, the federations and FIDE associated organizations